Water is one of the best types in Pokemon, making it perfect for my first attempt at a monotype challenge in Pokemon Sacred Gold, a difficulty Romhack by Drayano that changes every boss fight to a decked out full team of 6. And I'm gonna try to make it to the very end with hardcore Nuzlocke restrictions, meaning I only get to catch the first water type I find per route, and if any of my aquatic mons should go down the drain, they'll stay flushed forever, and losing a battle at any point sends me right back to the start of the game. So let me know what your favorite water type is down in the comments below, and I'll let you know right now that you're wrong if it isn't Piplup. Although I wouldn't say you're as wrong as you could be if your pick is our Johto starter of choice, Totodile. Drayano's basically given Totodile everything it could have ever asked for by giving it the Guts ability that later turns into the best ability in the game, Intimidate. One of the many reasons water is great is because of the sheer abundance of water-type Pokemon. Almost every single route has some water where we can use our newly acquired Old Rod. We just need to actually get our hands on some Pokeballs first. To get some, I have to first pay a visit to Mr. Pokemon's house, where I run into Cynthia, who gives us an Eevee, which of course isn't a water type, but will be as soon as we can get our hands on a water stone. This of course means I can't use it in battle until it evolves, so we need some other water types. I start by fishing in Cherry Grove City, where I pick up Surf and Turf the Corphish with Adaptability. I next pick up Pina Colada the Raindish Lotad, which makes the choice of who to evolve with the early game water stone a bit more difficult. I mean, it would have been an easier choice if we actually got Swift Swim in anything but the worst possible nature. Before reaching Violet City, I fish on Route 31, where I find a Tentacool. A poison type is great here, giving us an actual option to take on the grass types in Sprout Tower, and having access to early game Toxic Spike seems incredibly strong. Dark Cave does have a little pool of water where we can pick up the water ground type, Barboach. Another encounter and another bad nature for Antler Boy. Once we reach Violet City, we can talk to this juggler to commence the starter quiz. Is a Dragonair more than 13 feet long? Wait, how long is a dragon? How long's a foot? Is this some kind of imperial question I'm too European to understand? I'm just gonna have to guess. Congratulations on winning Who Can Measure a Dragonair? Winning the quiz gives us our choice of Kanto starter, which is how I got Edward. I thought he kind of looked like an Edward. Also, editing Antler Boy here, I looked it up, and Dragonair is exactly 4 meters long, which is 1/10 of an inch longer than 13 feet. Or rather, about 1/4 of a centimeter longer than 13 feet. Now you know. Now listen, you might think everything we've done up to this point has been super important. We've collected a full team of 6, and despite his 2 grass types, we're able to take down Elder Lee without losing any of them. Even though defeating this man gives us our choice of evolution stone so we can evolve Eevee into Vaporeon, that doesn't even compare to the most important thing we do in Sprout Tower. The tower only offers us a single eligible encounter in Bidoof, which just like Eevee, isn't a water type until it evolves, but it does evolve at the exact level cap of 15, turning into Hero Man. But you could just call him HM. And our hero arrives just in time to take on the first gym leader, Faulkner. Every gym leader in Sacred Gold has a full team of 6, and just because he's the first one, Faulkner is no exception. But B-Barrel is a hero man with a plan, and even though our first rollout doesn't take Doduo out, we barely take any damage from an Aerial Ace, setting us up for the KO turn 2. Rollout number 3 quickly takes care of Swablu, which brings in Chatot, and I wasn't sure B-Barrel would outspeed, but with the 4 levels we currently have on this thing, which ends up being enough to outspeed, even though our base speed is quite a bit slower, after which rollout number 5 takes care of Farfetch'd. Going into every boss fight, we've got to be at the level cap, but there's nothing stopping us from leveling up during the fight, so I made sure to get as close to level 16 as I could before starting the battle. Despite being at level 17 at this point, Murkrow still outspeeds, and with an Aerial Ace, we're taken into the red by a crit, but since we're locked into rollout, all we can do is sit back and watch what happens. Because Faulkner still has his highest level Pokemon left, and if this thing outspeeds Hero Man, it's over. But of course we outspeed, it's Hero Man we're talking about, come on. With our first badge collected, I head towards the ruins of Alph to fish up one of the most important encounters in the game, Magikarp, which I can conveniently do using this video's sponsor, Red Magic, a series of mobile devices dedicated to providing players the ultimate gaming experience, and they've just released their newest tablet, the Red Magic Astra Gaming Tablet, designed to deliver unmatched performance and immersive gameplay for the most demanding players. And with the powerful Snapdragon 8 Elite processor and incredible liquid cooling system, this absolute unit certainly lives up to those demands. Naturally, just as I've stress-tested previous Red Magic models, I booted up Bloons TD6 and spammed as many laggy towers as I could. But instead of succeeding with my lag mission, I simply had an awesome time gaming with flawless performance. I also booted up Minecraft and filled the screen with TNT, but even then, I had no lag and completely seamless frame rate. So if you're looking for the top-end mobile gaming experience, I can truly recommend the Red Magic Astra gaming tablet, available now by clicking the link in the description or pinned comment down below. Once you beat Faulkner, you should always head to the ruins of Alf and smash these rocks to pick up shards. You can get all 4 colors of shards by doing this, and there's no cap on how many you can collect. From there, you can trade your shards with this juggler to get as many berries as you want based on how many rocks you're willing to smash. Just south of Violet City, I fish on Route 32, where I find one of my favorite water types ever, Quillfish. Then once we reach Azalea Town, we can take our second starter quiz. Is the Lax Incense required in order to breed a Munchlax? Wait, I don't know. I've never bred a Munchlax. It's gotta be a Lax Incense, right? It's gotta be a yes. I'm sorry, that would be the full incense. Listen, I'll tell you what you're full of. Thankfully, we get to retry the quiz as many times as we want, because I'd be really bummed if we missed out on the Kipster. Who doesn't love Mudkip? If you like Mudkip, subscribe. If you don't like Mudkip, I'd suggest therapy, but you're probably beyond saving, not gonna lie. I next head down Slowpoke Well, where I find, well, Slowpoke. There's also a King's Rock lying around, which is pretty huge since both of the Pokemon that evolved with King's Rock are water types. And speaking of evolutions, because Bugsy's level cap is at 21, we're able to evolve Magikarp into the best Nuzlocke Pokemon of all time. And Gyarados is very central to my strategy for Bugsy, who's widely considered one of the hardest boss fights in the entire game. Now, as you can see, I start the fight with my Gyarados at a mere single HP. I achieved this by getting Gyarados poisoned against a wild Krogunk and then walking around until I survive at 1 HP. Gyarados doesn't get a ton of useful moves at this level, but we do get Flail that's at full power if we're at a single HP. This allows me to one-shot both Bugsy's lead Butterfree and the Yanma that comes in next, but unfortunately, they give out so much experience that the Yanma gets me to level 22. Leveling up always gives you a little bit of HP, meaning I'm no longer at full power Flail. I don't think Flail at 1 HP would have taken out Heracross regardless, but this basically means we can't use Gyarados, our best Pokemon, for the rest of the fight anymore, and I'm not actually sure that's a worthwhile trade-off just to beat Butterfree and Yanma. After I switch in Vaporeon, Heracross for whatever reason decides to help me out by setting up Rain Dance. It follows that up with Counter, giving me a free turn of Water Gun. It makes sense since my original plan was to try and get a few defense drops with Rock Smash before switching out, but Bugsy pretty much played himself by setting up the Rain since I'm not gonna pass up on boosted water damage. Beedrill comes out next, and I foolishly stay in against a Cut, which I completely forgot is now a Grass type move. I get a bit of damage with Water Gun before switching out into Quillfish, who's here to set up Toxic Spikes. I didn't want to set up Toxic Spikes too early in the fight since for one, Beedrill could just get rid of them by switching in. Secondly, I would have pretty much instantly lost to his Guts Heracross, but because he's allowed me to take it out pretty much for free, I take the opportunity to set up Toxic Spikes before defeating Beedrill since it's going to help out a lot against his other big threat, Pinsir. Scyther is unfortunately unaffected by Toxic Spikes and takes out Quillfish since I'm locked into Rollout. Listen, not everybody can be Hero Man, okay? Bugsy starts by setting up a Sword Stance, giving me a completely free turn of Rollout since Hero Man has the Unaware ability, meaning I'm completely unaffected by stat boosts. Sure, Scyther does exactly half of my health with U-Turn, but that does conveniently put me in range of Citrus Berry once he swaps out into Pinsir. This heals me back up to about 75% HP, and as long as I can stay over half, we should be able to survive another hit from Scyther. The second rollout takes Pinsir down to about half on the switch, and Fury Cutter doesn't take Hero Man below half. Once the third turn of rollout takes Pinsir out, Bugsy is down to just Scyther, and as long as Bugsy doesn't crit us, we should take him out here with a final rollout. It's a shame to have lost Quillfish in this fight, but I did have to sacrifice something to get Hero Man in for free versus Scyther, which is unfortunately the first death of the run, and things aren't about to get easier from here. On our way to Goldenrod, we pass through Ilex Forest, where the only two possible encounters are Magikarp and Poliwag, meaning we're guaranteed to get a Poliwag because of Dupe's Claws. Once we reach Goldenrod, we can take the final starter quiz, and listen, I haven't played Pokemon Yellow since the early 2000s, but I still got all the questions right and received my favorite water-type Pokemon. You've finally made it to the team, Piplup. Instead of her usual 2, Whitney now has a full team of 6 annoying Pokemon, and her lead Lickitung even has has Power Whip. This is a 120 base power grass type move, so I lead with Jelly Bean, who at least doesn't take super effective damage from it. This causes Lickitung to go for Body Slam instead, and I unfortunately get paralyzed, but a Citrus Berry puts me in a range where I can at least take another non-crit. This gives me just enough wiggle room to set up 2 layers of Toxic Spikes before swapping out into Vaporeon. Toxic Spikes are extremely powerful in this matchup since Whitney doesn't have a way to get rid of them. From here, Bo's in a pretty bad spot. If Lickitung ever clicks Power Whip, I'm probably just dead. For whatever reason, it's prioritizing going for stuff like Disable and Attract, giving me the chance to attack. And once it finally goes for Power Whip, I luck out with a miss. This gives me just enough time to take it out before it does the same to me. Second out is the biggest problem on Whitney's team, Clefable. This thing has Magic Guard, meaning it's unaffected by Toxic Spikes, and even if it got poisoned, it wouldn't take any damage at the end of the turn anyway. This means I'm unable to use any stall tactics to wear down this bulky behemoth. What makes it particularly dangerous is the fact that it has Charge Beam. Thankfully, we have an immunity to Electric with Marsh Stomp, and initially I try to solo Clefable with the Kipster, who puts it to sleep, lowers its speed with a Mud Shot, and then tries for flinches with Headbutt. Unfortunately, I get attracted as soon as Clefable wakes up, and Whitney heals almost all the way back up to full when I swap out into Bo. Looks like I'm gonna have to use my backup strategy, which is gonna be extremely time consuming. Because Clefable only has Water Pulse and Charge Beam as attacking moves, I can swap between Bo, who's completely immune to Water Pulse with its Water Absorb ability, and the Kipster, who's immune to Charge Beam. I then just need to repeat these switches until Clefable eventually runs out of PP for one of its attacking moves. The annoying part is this takes about twice as long as it needs to, since Clefable spams Reflect and Attract basically any chance it gets. But hey, a few minutes later, Clefable's all out of Charge Beam, so we can safely stay in with Bo, who's now once again at full HP from all the water we absorbed. Miltank is another Pokemon I was really worried about for obvious reasons. It's the most annoying Pokemon in all of base Heart Gold Soul Silver, and it basically keeps its original moveset except swapping Stomp for Body Slam. Because all the Pokemon I could reasonably bring to this fight are male for some unlucky reason, I stay in just to get attracted before swapping out into Gyarados. Intimidate drops Miltank's attack as I switch in, and I thankfully don't get paralyzed by Body Slam. By level 24, Gyarados has learned Dragon Rage, which always deals 40 damage. This unfortunately isn't enough to get the cow below half HP, but a held Citrus Berry after taking a second Body Slam allows me to get enough HP to even take me out of range of a critical hit Body Slam and finish the cow with a third Dragon Rage. Fourth out is Lopunny, and here we can employ a pretty devious strategy by swapping into Hero Man to first take a Dizzy Punch and then protect ourselves from the incoming Jump Kick, causing Lopunny to crash and take a bunch of damage before we swap out into Bo. Bo unfortunately gets pretty thoroughly abused by this Lopunny, first getting Jump Kicked and then confused by a Dizzy Punch, after which we somehow manage to break through confusion but still get fully paralyzed. Thankfully, all Bo needed to do was sponge the hits for Lopunny to ultimately go down to poison. Whitney's fifth Pokemon is Stantler Boy, which I respect greatly, but it does stay poisoned by the Toxic Spikes, meaning we can stall it out. After a couple of turns of protecting, I get attracted by the Stantler, so I swap out into Bo expecting the Hypnosis. Bo is already suffering from paralysis, so we're safe from the evil of Hypnosis. He also manages to not get paralyzed when it matters most and protect as Stantler goes down to poison. Whitney's last Pokemon is Wigglytuff, but without any protection from poison, we basically just need to switch around and stay alive as it goes down to poison. The execution of this plan ends up being stalled out quite a lot by Wigglytuff's wish and the fact that Whitney still has a Super Potion. Even so, the Kipster has way too much HP for Wigglytuff to deal with, and poison eventually seals the deal, granting us an unexpected Deathless third gym badge. Before leaving Goldenrod City, I fish on Route 34, where I'm basically guaranteed to pick up Staryu. And with my luck, I of course get the completely useless ability Illuminate and a minus speed nature on what's otherwise possibly the best encounter in the game. It's like I'm cursed to never get the optimal ability. Fishing on Route 35 gives me a 10% chance to pick up Love Disc, which is incredibly good in this game, but I end up getting the much more likely Psyduck, which is the only other option. Because the level cap is now increased from 24 to 29 after Whitney, we can finally evolve Poliwag into Poliwhirl, which means we need to decide whether we want to evolve it with a Water Stone into Poliwrath, which is the only fighting type we can get in the game, or Politoed, which means we'll never have a fighting type, but it's still far and away the much better option with the ability Drizzle to set up permanent rain since this is Generation 4. The boost to water-type moves and activating abilities like Rain Dish and Swift Swim if we ever get a Pokemon with it are just too valuable to pass up on. On top of that, we get one of the biggest power boosts to our water types in Ecruteak City when we receive the HM for Surf, a reteachable 95 base power move that every one of our Pokemon can learn. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows around here, or rain and rainbow, you know what I mean. We got a bit of a problem around here, and it's Morty's Gengar. With Thunderbolt and Giga Drain, this is basically the anti-water type. By virtue of levitating and being a poison type, we can't do any toxic spike shenanigans, so it's safe to say we're in for a pretty bad time. That being said, the rest of Morty's team are some pretty manageable ghost types, so as long as we can make it past Gengar, we should be okay. I lead with Storm the Politoed, who I didn't remember to nickname until a little bit later in the run, but we set up the rain and take out Duskull with a turn 1 boosted Surf, bringing out Gengar. This first switch is a little bit risky, since I'm just hoping that Gengar goes for anything but Giga Drain as I send in the Kipster. If I try to brute force my way through Gengar here, I'm gonna guaranteed lose a few Pokemon, so my best bet is to try and stall it out of moves. However, this isn't too safe, since my best bet is switching between Gyarados and Marshtomp. And while Marshtomp is immune to Thunderbolt, Gyarados takes a bit of damage from Giga Drain every single time. By protecting every other turn, I can stall out twice as much PP while taking the same amount of damage. Eventually, this puts me in a tricky spot, since Gyarados is now both dead to Shadow Ball and Thunderbolt. I see Shadow Ball as I go for Protect, and decide to risk the 50-50, sending in Hero Man. With my luck, I of course lose the coin flip, but I came prepared for the situation with a Wakan Berry to make sure I at least survive. I see Thunderbolt as I Protect, but this again is another coin flip between Thunderbolt and Giga Drain that I end up losing. I wasn't even sure if a Rindo Berry would allow me to survive here, but thankfully I do with just 19 HP remaining. After a Protect, Gengar is completely out of its 10 Giga Drains, meaning it's gonna swap between Shadow Ball to hit Kipster and Thunderbolt to hit Hero Man. Once Gengar then runs out of Thunderbolt, it only has Shadow Ball and Hypnosis left. Gengar is just gonna spam Hypnosis since Shadow Ball doesn't do anything at all. Because of this, I decided to just spam Headbutt until Gengar is completely out of Hypnosis. This means I've gotten rid of every Thunderbolt, every Giga Drain, and every Hypnosis PP, finally allowing me to take it out with a couple of rain-boosted Aqua Tails. It wasn't exactly beautiful, but we didn't lose any of our Pokemon. The rest of Morty's Mons are extremely manageable, and I can swap between my 3 remaining Pokemon that I didn't use to take care of Gengar to easily knock them out one by one. I was hoping access to Rain and Surf would give us more of an offensive strategy, but it seems defense is still king. With Chuck's level cap at 35, we frustratingly can't fully evolve 3 out of our 4 starters, but the rest of our team basically reached their fully evolved state. Once I get to Olivine City, I can also pick up the Good Rod, which opens up a ton of new encounters. Using it in Olivine, for example, I'm able to pick up a Volt Absorb Chinchou. Having an electric type gives us much better coverage, and even though we already have 2 ground types immune to electric, another one really can't hurt when all the rest of our Mons are cripplingly weak to it. While surfing through Route 40, I pick up a Wingull, and on Route 41, I make sure to use the Old Rod instead of the Good Rod, since we've already duped out both Tentacool and Magikarp. This guarantees that our encounter is the 10% Horsey. I of course end up getting Sniper instead of Swift Swim, since this game hates me, I guess. Sorry, Suicune, you are a water type, but no legendaries allowed. My encounter in Cianwood City is instead a Carvana. And listen, I might not be able to get Swift Swim, but at least this thing has Speed Boost. We don't have any obvious weakness against Chuck, but we also don't have any particular advantage. I set up the rain with Politoed, and I can't really risk Primeape setting up a sub and Focus punching me into oblivion, so I just go for Surf the first turn, breaking his sub, which causes Chuck to swap out into Poliwrath. I try to get Poliwrath paralyzed with a Body Slam before it puts me to sleep with Hypnosis, but this kind of helps me out since it guarantees Poliwrath won't go for Hypnosis as I swap out into Gyarados. I was really hoping Thunderbolt would do a bit more damage than it does here, but at least we get that paralysis we were fishing for with Body Slam. Poliwrath also seems committed to going for Surf, so I stay in and launch another Thunderbolt. Sadly, Poliwrath pretty much heals up all the damage I do with a Citrus Berry and then manages to land a Hypnosis. I stay in and try and shake off the sleep, and probably a turn longer than I really should have before I swap out into Jellybean. I then immediately pivot out of Jellybean into Blink 171, who eats a Surf and then finishes off Poliwrath with a Thunderbolt. The biggest problem for us to deal with is Chuck's Breloom, and it's partly why I didn't immediately set up Toxic Spikes, since we'd have to deal with its Poison Heal. I was really hoping for a Bullet Seed as I swap into Pelipper, but unfortunately I get put to sleep, which burns my Lumberry. Breloom then thankfully goes for Bullet Seed the next turn instead of just putting me to sleep with Spore again. A 3-hitter doesn't quite take me below half HP, and I can retaliate with a quad effective Pluck, which doesn't even get close close to getting the KO because of Pelipper's atrocious base 50 attack stat. I get a bit of HP back at the end of the turn to better handle an incoming bullet seed, but unfortunately Chuck wises up and puts me to sleep again. With Gyarados still in the red from taking down Poliwrath, I can't really do anything but stay in. All I can hope for are as few bullet seed hits as possible, and that Pelipper actually wakes up and takes it out. Somehow this is what happens, possibly a lucky break for all the terrible encounters we've gotten. Whatever the reason is, I'll certainly take it. Once Primeape comes in, I swap out into Lantern, who gets healed by a Thunder Punch. After eating a Rock Slide, Lantern defeats Primeape with a Surf, which brings out Hariyama. Here I make a bit of a risky play. If this is a critical hit fake out, we just lose Gyarados. What I should have done is just protected the first turn with Lantern to guarantee we don't get hit by fake out, and then swap into Gyarados on the Earthquake. Hariyama's now guaranteed to go for Cross Chop or Whirlwind, so I can safely send in Tentacruel and then swap out into Underbite on the incoming Earthquake. I then repeat this loop another 5 times to get Hariyama down to -6 attack. Once it's at -6, I make sure to swap out of Tentacruel into our flying type Pelipper and heal up with Roost. With nothing better to do, Hariyama starts spamming Whirlwind, which sends in Politoed. He keeps doing this every single turn, making it extremely hard to get a move in, but eventually I get Whirlwinded out into Pelipper and can take Hariyama out with a critical hit Surf. This just leaves Chuck with his 2 Hitmons. After a fake out, I get hit by a Rock Slide, and it even looks like I'm gonna be able to survive another one the following turn. I decide to just stay in and risk it. Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Just never risk a crit. Okay, it's not worth it. Now I don't have a Pelipper anymore. Okay, I honestly have no idea how Hitmonlee outspeeds me here with its base 87 speed, causing me to just barely survive a high jump kick and then take it out with a Surf, which means I just risked another crit without even knowing it. To take care of Hitmonchan, I swap into Feraligatr to get an Intimidate drop, but he's also still at full HP, making Spike the perfect Pokemon to finish the job. We did just lose another Pokemon, but at least we can replace it with one of the best items in the game, the Choice Band. Beating the gym also means we increase the current level cap, which allows us to evolve all of our starters to their final form. It also allows us to evolve into Slowbro, which is one of the best physical tanks in the game. With our new fully evolved roster, it isn't too hard to take down Team Rocket on Route 47, even though a lot of what made it possible deathless is that Riley sponged all the hits and had every single one of his Pokemon die. Not losing anything else between the 2 gyms is actually huge, since it means we have our best possible team yet going into the next gym fight. Jasmine is certainly the least threatening boss fight so far. Water resists Steel, and 5 out of her 6 Pokemon aren't particularly specially defensive at all. I'm not sure why she has a Metang and not a Metagross, since it would probably be an appropriate challenge at this point in the game, but even with a critical hit, it doesn't even take Politoed below half. I finish it off with another Surf, which brings in Magneton. Because we resist Flash Cannon and have full immunity to its electric type moves, this thing isn't a threat whatsoever. Lantern washes it off the face of the earth, and because Steelix has Earthquake, Jasmine sends it in next. This would be a completely reasonable play if Steelix were faster, but Lantern just outspeeds, and a rain-boosted Surf easily knocks out Steelix in one hit. Fortress has Explosion, so just in case I swap into Gyarados to get an Intimidate drop and take it out with a couple of Surfs. Skarmory has nothing to threaten me with, so I just zap it out of the sky with a couple of Thunderbolts, and then switch back out into Lantern to finish off her final Pokemon, Bronzong. Finally, a boss fight that just goes completely my way. Now that we have access to the Lake of Rage, I immediately go to pick up the second set of choice items in the game, the Specs. I give the epic classes to my Gyarados to strike down the competition with a Thunderbolt and assert dominance. I then let Swampert deal with the Team Rocket Electrode, since it not only is immune to electric type moves, but the damp ability means the Electrodes can't explode. We then have to take care of Price, but this is the second gym battle that goes completely swimmingly. The only real thing we need to play around in this fight is Frostlass with Thunderbolt, which is brought out as soon as I take care of Abomasnow with a flamethrower. To deal with Frostlass, you guessed it, I do some more PP stalling. This time by swapping between Lantern to dodge the Thunderbolts and Hero Man to dodge the Shadow Balls. Then once the Frostlass is down to just Ice Shards, I'm free to take it out with an Aqua Tail. From there, the only other real danger comes from Mamoswine, but that's why we set up Toxic Spikes, so we can get damage over time as we swap around and dodge Earthquakes with Gyarados as we lower its attack with Intimidate. It takes a bit of switching around, and as I switch to Slowbro, I need to dodge Stone Edge crit, but between misses and it not critting, I end up getting away with it. Once Mamoswine falls, we're looking at Dugong, Glalie, and Lapras. We just don't want to see Glalie explode. As for Lapras and Dugong, they can be easily handled by Lantern, since we resist both ice and water and can't be hit by Lapras's Thunderbolt at all. As for Glalie, it won't ever go for Explosion if it's the last Pokemon, so I can freely swap in Gyarados and knock it out with a single Specs Surf. Before we can move on towards Blackthorn City, we've got to take on all of Team Rocket. And it's at this point in the game I learn you can just buy evolution stones in Goldenrod City. This would have been extremely helpful to know, especially to take on Chuck, and maybe we wouldn't have lost Pelipper, but you live you learn. When it comes to Team Rocket, I'm not overly concerned. I mean, sure, we need to put together more than a brain cell and a half to beat Petrol, who normally just has a team full of coughings and a single wheezing that like to explode. I still managed to make it through the fight deathless, but while I'm not too worried about Team Rocket, the rival fight in the basement is a very different story. Not only does this guy have the exact same Gengar Morty has, except with Thunder instead of Thunderbolt, which is 100% accurate in my reign, he also has an Alakazam with both Shockwave and Energy Ball. Last time, it basically took everything I had to get past Gengar unscathed, and if we would have had to face an Alakazam right after, we would have lost a ton of Pokemon. To make matters worse, the guy also has a Meganium, so I swap into Golduck. I was really hoping Golduck would do over half here, in which case we could probably save his life. Instead, we end up falling just short as Meganium sets up its attack with Swords Dance. I really can't take the risk of putting this Meganium in healing range since my plan to beat this fight is extremely fragile. Golduck is holding a Rindo Berry to be able to survive the Seed Bomb here, but it's mostly in case Meganium goes for Seed Bomb as we swap it in the very first turn. Politoed is slightly stronger, so I need one hit of Ice Beam from Blue Duck before I can swap back in. I did my chip damage with Zen Headbutt just in case I managed to pull off a flinch, but unfortunately Blue Duck couldn't go all the way. He didn't have Swift Swim, so he didn't really offer any unique utility as a water type, making him a perfect sacrifice. Gengar comes out next, and I'm basically gonna try to employ the exact same strategy we used against Morty. I aim to dodge a Thunderbolt by swapping in Lantern, but Hypnosis is just fine too, since it means it's never gonna go for Hypnosis while Lantern's in. Instead of Gyarados, I bring my much more specially defensive Tentacruel and Empoleon this time. I end up in a situation where I can't take any more Giga Drains with Jelly Bean or Julia, so I've gotta just swap out into Lantern. This is the final Giga Drain, so I gave Lantern a Rindo Berry in case we face this exact situation. Now that Gengar's left with just Shadow Ball and Hypnosis, I can once again send in Hero Man and knock it out with an Aqua Tail. This brings out Alakazam, and I really don't have a good way of dealing with this now that I've spent all my resources on trying to defeat Gengar. I thought a long time about who to sacrifice here, and ultimately it ended up being Jelly Bean. Empoleon and Lantern are too valuable to give up, and B-Barrel is my only normal type, so it's my only way to take on future Gengars. I know Politoed can take a Shockwave, so I made sure to give it a Rindo Berry to survive Energy Ball from Alakazam, after which I can take it out with a Rain-boosted Surf. I didn't expect Alakazam to go for Thunder Wave, but a full Para could easily cause us to have to sack another Pokemon. Magmar's basically not a threat at all, so even though we get hit by Focus Blast, I end up connecting with my Surf to take it out in one hit. Finally, there's Seadra, and after taking one Surf, I realize that I can survive a critical hit, which the Seadra actually ends up getting, making it a completely free matchup as long as I don't get fully paralyzed. After that bittersweet victory, we face 4 executive battles in a row. But while Proton barely puts up any resistance whatsoever, I run into trouble as I face Ariana. Admittedly, I definitely get a lucky break here after I take out Jinx and fight Vileplume with Empoleon. I really didn't expect Drain Punch to be a 3-hit KO from a Vileplume here, and frankly, I was just gonna have to sack Empoleon. Except instead, Empoleon proves why it's my favorite by getting a lucky freeze and completely cheesing the Vileplume. And I'm very glad it did, because the rest of the fight did not go as I expected. To take on Honchkrow, I send in my bulkiest Pokemon, Slowbro, who ends up taking really a lot more damage than I expected from a Brave Bird. And with my inflated confidence from that freeze, I figure, hey, I've got more than half health, why don't I stay in, let the Honchkrow deal recoil damage, and then I'll take it out with an Ice Beam. Yeah, I really should have expected that to happen, and now I've lost my best physical defender. I'm still able to pick up that KO with an Ice Beam, just with one more fainted Pokemon than I was hoping for. From there, the fight goes mostly fine until I face Ariana's final Pokemon, Ugly. I can't risk losing Storm at all since it's the most valuable Pokemon I have. Both Empoleon and Lantern are just way too hurt to be swapped in, and Sharpedo can't take a hit at all. So I basically had to make the call which of my Pokemon is the least valuable right now. Sorry, Splurp, but I do have 2 water ground types. I knew the Team Rocket Gauntlet would be difficult, but at this rate, we're gonna have more fainted Pokemon than living. And honestly, things didn't get better from here. After defeating Ariana, we normally have to face Archer, but in Sacred Gold, there's a back-to-back battle with Giovanni right afterwards. At the start of the fight with Archer, everything basically went right. I took out his 3 first Pokemon, bringing in Scizor. I could have swapped out to Gyarados here to get an Intimidate drop, but Swords Dance would still leave it at +1, and the switch is just way too dangerous in case Scizor keeps setting up. This sacrifice was calculated, and Bow is probably the most expendable Pokemon in my box since it doesn't do anything unique except for Water Absorb. Having an immunity is fantastic, but it's not that great in the context of a team full of water types that all already resist water. This means I've got to go into the final Team Rocket boss fight with only 5 Pokemon. The game heals your team in between the 2 fights, but if I ever send a Vaporeon in, or I'm left with just Vaporeon standing, I just lose the run on the spot. The mon we need to be the most careful around is Nidoking, since it's got both Thunderbolt and Earthquake. But because Gyarados is immune to Earthquake and Lantern immune to Thunderbolt, I can swap between the 2 until Nidoking is at -6 attack, at which point I'm safe to eat the Earthquake and take it out with a Surf. Once Nidoqueen comes in, I swap around into Kipster to get it yawned. I can then switch in Gyarados on an Earth Power and safely take Nidoqueen out with a Rain-boosted Aqua Tail. It's only once I face Tauros I realize I'm in a bit of trouble. Everything on my team is either too hurt to swap into this Double Edge or really doesn't want to take it. A Rain-boosted Surf isn't even enough to take Tauros out. I could swap in Gyarados, and even though it could probably survive 2 Double Edges after Intimidate, if a single one of them crits, I lose one of my best Pokemon. In the end, I decide to sacrifice Edward to not risk losing Gyarados. I'm so sorry, Eddie. From here, Gyarados can pick up the pieces, meaning we're finally done with Team Rocket forever, even though it came at the cost of quadrupling our death count. Having lost so many Pokemon, we've got to pick up some new ones, and I realize I've only run into the red Gyarados, which is a dupe, at the Lake of Rage. Fishing here with a good rod guarantees us a Feebas, which ain't too shabby. Never mind, it's literally as shabby as it gets, I guess. In the Ice Path, the only 2 encounters I can possibly get are Celio or Seal, either of which is fantastic for the upcoming Dragon Gym. Then once I reach Blackthorn City, this lady with a horsey just gives me a Dragon Scale. Perfect item at the perfect time since Kingdra really helps us against the upcoming gym. As my last bit of preparation, I finally get the Choice Scarf from Mom. The final gym leader, Claire, has been given an Altaria and Salamence to round out her existing team. And a White Herb Draco Meteor Salamence sounds like something straight out of my nightmares. After setting up the rain, Specs Politoed immediately knocks out her lead Dragonair, bringing in Gyarados. As I switch to Lantern, I expect Gyarados to set up to +1 attack and +1 speed with a Dragon Dance. In combination with Earthquake, you might expect that to be game over for Angler Boy out here. But we of course came prepared with a Shucca Berry to reduce the damage from super effective ground type moves and thus survive the incoming Earthquake. Checkmate, Gyarados. This brings out Dragonair number 2, which doesn't really have anything better than just spamming Outrage to do. Honestly, Outrage does a bit more damage than I expected here. Dragonair isn't super strong, but this is still an incredibly powerful move. A crit there would have been devastating, but because I survived, I can at least take it out with an Ice Beam. Salamence comes out next, and Storm has no chance of outspeeding, so I swap out into Empoleon. With a moveset of Dragon Pulse, Fire Blast, Hydro Pump, and Draco Meteor, Draco is by far the best bet here, but it doesn't even put Empoleon in crit range, making it completely safe to stay in to tank another and take it out with an Ice Beam. Kingdra comes out next, and I expect it to go for its most powerful move, which is Hydro Pump, since Empoleon resists all of them. This gives us a great opportunity to swap in our own Kingdra to quad resist the hit. Thankfully, her Kingdra's also Sniper and not Swift Swim, otherwise I'd be out of my mind to bring rain. This means we're guaranteed to outspeed Kingdra with a held Choice Scarf and can one-shot it with a Draco Meteor of our own. Finally, this leaves Altaria, so I swap into Walrein, who tanks a couple of Dragon Pulses before taking it out with a Blizzard. But hey, what do you expect from a Dragon-type gym leader when literally every Pokemon in our box can learn Ice Beam. With all 8 gym badges collected, we've now got to set our sights on the Pokemon League. To get there, we've got to surf through Route 27, where we're guaranteed to pick up Weasel. This thing either has Technician or Swift Swim, and we finally got our Swift Swim Pokemon. And this huge addition to the team might just be the ticket to bail us out of the one thing standing between us and the Indigo Plateau. Once again, we stand face to face with another existential rival battle, but this time we're a little bit better equipped. First of all, we don't need to worry about Meganium since Choice Specs makes Ice Beam KO in one hit. Alakazam comes out next, and Silver has gotten rid of Shockwave, meaning it can only go for Energy Ball. This means I can guarantee Floaty survives the switch-in by giving it a held Rindo Berry. From there, we're also guaranteed to be faster because of Swift Swim. The KO threshold, on the other hand, was not so guaranteed. Despite the boost to our water-type damage from Rain, I had to level up Floaty all the way to the E4 level cap and grind for a bunch of attack EVs to guarantee that we get the one-shot against Gengar. I didn't need all that much, but I just didn't want to take any chances. And I gotta say, it was pretty nice to not have to PP stall a Gengar for the first time in this challenge. Magmortar goes down to another waterfall, and we swap in Lantern against Kingdra and take it out with a couple of guaranteed Thunders. With Silver defeated, we've now made it to the Indigo Plateau and have to decide on our final team. Obviously, I'm bringing Storm since Rain is our greatest asset. Speed Boost Torpedo is a monster in the rain. We can give it a choice band to further boost our damage output and keep getting faster at the end of every single turn. Starmie's simply our fastest special attacker, and I bring Swampert to help it out with Koga. Gyarados is our only ground immunity and an excellent physical tank, which finally leaves us with Kingdra, our Dragon Slayer. Unlike base Heart Gold Soul Silver, you can take on the Elite Four members in any order you want. Even so, I opt to take on Will first since every single one of his Pokemon is weak to Dark. The level cap for the Elite Four applies when we enter, so I made sure to get Sharpedo enough EXP so that we level up against the very first Pokemon. This boosts our attack by 4 whole points, and we get a speed boost at the end of the turn. Lunatone comes out next, and just like Jinx, it gets completely decimated by a Crunch. In fact, the only Pokemon I was worried about not one-shotting is Slowbro. It ends up being Will's final Pokemon, and because it only has Flamethrower and Surf to hit me with, I'm really not at any risk. It also just ends up being a one-shot, so I had nothing to worry about, and the fight is completely free. Instead of Koga, I take on Bruno second, and I can't just start sweeping with Starmie because of his lead Hitmontop. So instead I lead with Politoed to set up the rain and get faked out. Starmie currently has the choice specs, but despite that, I still managed to one-shot Hitmontop in the rain because of a crit. I get a bit freaked out here by Hariyama's Thunder Punch and swap out into the Kipster as Hariyama sets up a sub. This is pretty dodgy since I need to get rid of the substitute as soon as possible, otherwise I'm gonna get hit by more unavoidable Focus Punches. I break the sub with a Waterfall and the Focus Punch really hurts. A critical hit here would have been game over for Kipster and possibly the whole run. With the Citrus Berry, I get back enough health to the point where I could take another non-crit, but as long as I attack every single turn, Focus Punch shouldn't be a problem from here. Hariyama's massive HP stat allows it to just barely survive a rain-boosted Waterfall and hit me with a payback. Bruno then goes for a full restore, but because Waterfall does over half and we get 2 turns in a row, it's GG for Hariyama. Hitmonlee comes out next, and the only feasible move this could be is High Jump Kick, so I can safely swap in Shuriken. The next turn, I tear Hitmonlee apart with a Spec Psychic, which brings in Lucario. Without being super effective, I don't know if Spec Psychic is enough to take this thing out, so I swap out into Bruce to take the incoming Dark Pulse. Choice Band Waterfall in the rain isn't super effective, but it might as well be. None of Bruno's 3 remaining Pokemon have a defense stat to remotely handle this kind of power. This, ladies and gentlemen, is peak Water-type gameplay. I decide to take on Koga and his Poison types third, but that's a bit of a lie since Venomoth's been changed to be a Bug Psychic type. It also has Giga Drain, so I immediately swap out of Storm into Claire after setting up the rain. Venomoth ends up missing Sleep Powder on the switch, which is huge since I don't actually get the KO with a rain-boosted Surf. Venomoth missing the first one means I still have my Lumberry intact for the second Sleep Powder. If that first one would have connected, we'd probably have to sack Kingdra here to get a free switch into Starmie. But as things are, we can just stay in versus Weezing and take it out with a rain-boosted Surf. Muck, on the other hand, is pretty specially bulky, so I swap out into the Kipster as it sets up a substitute. I don't know why the Elite Four are so determined to focus their punches on my Swampert, but Muck is a much weaker Pokemon Pokemon than Hariyama, so I really wasn't worried about it this time. Crobat comes out fourth, so I swap out into Underbite for the Intimidate drop. Now, I don't know why Drayana would keep Double Team on this thing, it's the most infuriating thing ever, but I still managed to hit both of my waterfalls to take it out, so it doesn't end up being an issue. Tentacruel comes out next and sets up Swords Dance of all things, which could have been a big problem, except I gave Gyarados the Earthquake TM from Victory Road, so I'm able to just knock it out in one hit. Koga's final Pokemon is Toxicroak, but we just outspeed it and take it out with a single Earthquake for the win. The final member of the Elite Four is Karen, and I've kept Aurasphere on my Starmie for this exact purpose. Specs Aurasphere easily knocks out Mightyena, but being locked into a fighting move won't do much against Spiritomb. I swap into Storm to set up my Rain, and a few Surfs take care of the Ghost. Honchkrow comes out next, and this thing's attack stat is so insane that I have to risk a crit no matter who I switch to. But there's really just one option for me since Gyarados is my only Pokemon that can survive a Brave Bird and a Sucker Punch afterwards. If either of them crits, Gyarados is screwed, but thankfully this Honchkrow has Insomnia instead of Superlock. Absol comes out next, so I swap out into the Kipster, who dodges a Thunder Wave on the switch. Then after eating a Megahorn, I delete the Disaster Doggo with a Rain-boosted Waterfall. Because Umbreon is her second to last Pokemon, she's of course going to send out Houndoom next. Knowing this, and the fact that Umbreon's only attacking move is Dark Pulse, which won't do much to Sharpedo, I decide to make the switch. Umbreon just goes for Double Team, but thankfully my Waterfall connects the next turn to take it out. Finally, this brings in Houndoom, but because we've gotten a turn of speed boost already, we're guaranteed to be faster, and a rain-boosted Waterfall is way more than enough to take it out. Despite a few risky moments that could have derailed the entire run, we've actually made it to the champion Lance, and we get to fight him with all 6 of our Pokemon. What makes Lance particularly dangerous is his now level 60 Dragonite. That huge level disparity between his and my Pokemon is gonna make it super difficult to outspeed. My Starmie already has a minus speed nature, so I made sure to give it a Choice Scarf to be as fast as possible and outspeed Gyarados to immediately take it out with a Thunderbolt. This brings out Aerodactyl second, and while I could outspeed it with a Thunderbolt, I don't think I'd get the KO, and I'd be completely screwed if Aerodactyl goes for Stone Edge. It ends up going for Torment, which would force me to switch anyway since I'm choiced, but I've got a fantastic check in Swampert to resist the Stone Edge and barely takes any damage from Aerial Ace. Because I don't have the Rain set up yet, a single Waterfall isn't quite enough to take Aerodactyl out. This causes Lance to heal with a full restore, so I use Ice Beam to not get him back into healing range again. From here, we just have to tank one more Aerial Ace before knocking Arrow out with a final Waterfall. This brings in the big bad level 60 Dragonite, and I really just have one possible plan here, unless I want to sacrifice a Pokemon to get a free switch. The plan's pretty risky, and I probably should have just brought a sacrifice. If Dragonite's Outrage crits at any point, I'll just lose my Gyarados for the rest of the game. But if it doesn't crit, my stupid plan gives me a 50% chance to keep my entire team alive. Step 1, tank the Outrage, and because of a Citrus Berry, we're able to tank a second one. This gives me the chance to go for an Ice Beam, and if I get a critical hit here, we just take Dragonite out. But that would be too easy, and so would a 2-turn Outrage. Whenever you use Outrage, you end up getting confused after 2 to 3 turns, and unfortunately, Dragonite got a 3-turner here. This means it's guaranteed to connect with Outrage as I swap in Claire instead of being confused, giving me a 50-50 chance for it to hit itself in confusion. I've made sure to give Kingdra a Haban Berry to survive this exact scenario, after which Dragonite finally becomes confused. Here's the coin flip, and if it hits itself, Kingdra lives. Okay, I really need to stop challenging fate. I'm clearly not a lucky person. These types of coin flips don't happen for me. Sorry, Kingdra. So that was a bit of a disaster, but at least we get the free switch into Shuriken, who's now free to outspeed with the Choice Scarf and take care of Dragonite with a quad-effective Ice Beam. Lance comes to the conclusion that if his level 60 Dragonite couldn't beat Starmie, I guess his level 56 one can. This just gives me a free KO against a Dragonite, so I'm not going to complain about it. In his infinite wisdom, because it didn't work to send out another Dragonite, Lance sends in Garchomp, which also gets instantly wrecked by an Ice Beam. Charizard would have been the better play from the start since, you know, it doesn't die to a single Ice Beam. Even so, Charizard is a Fire type, going up against a full team of Water types that just set up the Rain. He doubles his attack with a Swords Dance before I swap out into Shuriken, but he then completely throws by going for a second Swords Dance as I swap in. With the Scarf, I always outspeed Charizard, and Rain boosted Surf is more than enough to take it out, thus crowning me the Johto champion. But beating Lance is not the end of the Pokemon Sacred Gold Nuzlocke experience. To actually beat the challenge, we've gotta pay a visit to Kanto. Now, despite Dre having updated these fights, they're still not particularly difficult. All but one of Brock's Pokemon are quad weak to grass, so Ludicolo sucks him dry with Giga Drain. Misty makes the mistake of setting up rain for us so we can drop unavoidable thunders. This strategy doesn't quite work out for her. Lieutenant Surge should theoretically be a problem for us, but because we've kept the Kipster alive, I can just slap a Choice Scarf on it and wreck everything with earthquakes. Once we reach Fuchsia, we've got to clear out a Shelder infestation. To do this, we have to take out all the Cloyster around town, but we can choose to take on the one in the Poké Center first, which is guaranteed to be shiny. I mean, we have this Master Ball just lying around. While we're in Fuchsia City, I take care of Janine. It takes a little bit more strategy than the previous 3 gym leaders, but we mostly just spam Earthquake. Now, as you might imagine, I run into a little bit more trouble when facing Erica. We really just don't have enough neutral matchups versus grass to get through this fight unscathed. Scarf Starmie can immediately get rid of Jump Bluff so it doesn't set up the sun, that way we don't have to deal with any chlorophyll. This brings in Meganium, which is still able to one-turn Solar Beam because of a mental herb even without the sun. However, it doesn't have any other attacking moves other than Solar Beam, so I can just go for Protect every other turn to make sure I never get hit. Super easy Meganium, in comes Tangrowth. I swap in Gyarados, who gets put to sleep the second turn, so I'm forced to swap out into Ludi. As I switch in, Power Whip does way more damage than I thought it would. My Ice Beams barely do anything because of Light Screen, so I'm forced to swap out, sending in Underbite again. I managed to take out Tangrowth with a few Ice Beams, which brings in Victory Bell. Empoleon takes neutral damage from Grass, but this Leaf Blade still does way too much damage, and a critical hit would just sink me here. Things are going poorly enough, so I decide to just bite the bullet and sacrifice Walrein. This gives me a free switch into Storm, who can finish Victory Bell with a Specs Ice Beam. Blossom is a bit bulkier, so I swap into Pina Colada, who immediately gets confused. This was just supposed to be a sack since I've used Ludicolo against both Brock and Misty where I needed it, so the fact that I end up hitting myself in confusion here doesn't really matter too much. Underbite's at a decent amount of health, so I try to take out Blossom with Ice Beams, but I'm just not doing enough damage, and even though Blossom hits itself in confusion because of Petal Dance, Erica heals all the way up with a full restore, so I end up swapping out into Empoleon. There aren't too many fights left in the game, and at this point, having a flying type for blue is way more important than a steel type. The slight damage I did with an Ice Beam the turn she healed with a full restore is enough to put Blossom in range of a Specs Ice Beam from Storm, and I can simply one-shot Leafeon afterwards, which means I only lost a total of 3 Pokemon. I take on Sabrina next and immediately cause a calculated loss. I want to set up the rain, so I make sure to lead with Politoed and then send in Cloyster to eat the close combat. Because of the defense drops from close combat, I can easily take Gallade out with a rain-boosted Waterfall, and Medicham, Mr. Mime, and Alakazam suffer the same fate. The way Gen 4 AI sends in Pokemon, I know she's going to send every single Pokemon except Wobbuffet in first, since they all have super effective moves against Sharpedo, but before we're trapped in by Shadow Tag, I swap out Sharpedo for Surf and Turf. Crawdaunt easily one-shots Hypno with a Crunch, but just like Sharpedo, we just don't have the firepower to take Wobbuffet out in one hit. This loses us yet another Pokemon, and our box is getting extremely thin. All we need is to get to red with our 6 best Pokemon, and I'm gonna make any sacrifices necessary to make that happen. The last gym leader before we get to take on blue is Blaine, and this fight is about as easy as you might expect. We start with Choice Banded Floatzel to take care of his Pokemon up to Ninetales. This sets up the sun, reducing our water damage by half, so I simply swap into Storm to set up our own weather and wash away the rest of his team. It cost us a lot of Pokemon, but we finally made it to the former champion Blue. This close to the end of the game, we really don't want to trip on the finish line. Blue has one of the trickiest teams in the entire game, so I can't let my guard down now. I start by setting up the rain and immediately taking out his Nidoqueen. This brings out Exeggutor, which is one of the biggest threats on Blue's team. After the Erica fight, I only have Gyarados to take neutral damage from Grass. Leaf Storm takes me down to just above half, and my highest damaging move is to lock myself into Outrage. I sadly fall just barely short of dealing half of Exeggutor's health myself, as it sets up Trick Room. This allows it to outspeed the next turn and put me to sleep. Thankfully, Leaf Storm doesn't do nearly enough after the first special attack drop, and I get back over half health because of my held Citrus Berry. Now at -4 special attack, it's actually barely dealing any damage whatsoever, and I can kinda just stay in with Underbite and tank hits. I even eventually wake up and deal some damage with Waterfall, which was supposed to not take Exeggutor into healing range, but because of the rain and stab, it just deals way too much damage, and Blue heals up anyway. However, the turn Blue heals is exactly what I need, a free turn to swap into Sharpedo and take Exeggutor out with a Crunch. Because of Choice Band, I'm locked into Crunch, so I can't stay in against Machamp, swapping back into Underbite to get an Intimidate drop. I get Dynamic Punched here, which ironically doesn't quite do half of my health, but because I get confused, I swap out into Shuriken. Unfortunately, I get hit by another Dynamic Punch, and I just don't want to risk losing Starmie to Confusion, meaning it's sadly time for Gyarados to finally say goodnight. It's sad to see you go, buddy. We couldn't have gotten here without you. Our sacrifice allows us to send in Starmie and simply knock out Machamp with a Spec Psychic. Unfortunately, this leaves us locked into a Psychic move versus Tyranitar, so we definitely have to switch, sending in Blink 171 to absorb the incoming Thunder. With an obvious Earthquake incoming, I pivot into Storm to once again set up my Rain. Because Rain makes Thunder never miss, I was kinda hoping Blue would go for it, but missing a Stone Edge is just as favorable. A Rain-boosted Surf just barely misses out on the KO, so Lantern has to take the incoming Earthquake, but I of course came prepared just in case something like this would happen with a Shucka Berry to reduce the Ground-type move's power. We wash away Tyranitar with a Surf, which brings out Rhyperior. At this point, both of Blue's remaining Pokemon are terrible choices to face Lantern, so I can't exactly blame him for sending in a slower Pokemon that's quad weak to one of our stab moves, since his only other remaining option has the same issue. With Blue defeated, there's only one more boss fight remaining at the summit of Mount Silver, and while my team may be blue, all I could see was red. The classic final Johto showdown atop Mount Silver usually happens during a hailstorm, but we can completely bypass this annoying weather feature by leading with Storm and replacing it with Rain. This does enable Pikachu's Thunders, and if we don't swap out, it will kill us, so I send in Kipster and then immediately pivot out into Floaty, since this Pikachu does have Grass Knot, which would take out Floaty too, but we can reduce the damage with a Rindo Berry to make sure Floaty survives. With Swift Swim, we outspeed Pikachu even with its held Light Ball, and the Rain means Waterfall is a one-hit KO. Venusaur comes out next, but at this point, Floaty has done his job, and I just get as much damage as I can with Crunch. Sadly, this means the end for Floaty, who we can't thank enough for his efforts versus Silver, but his sacrifice is necessary to deal with Venusaur as efficiently as possible. I gave Shuriken the choice specs just to make sure we get this KO. Snorlax comes in next, and I couldn't go into the final fight without bringing our very first Pokemon. Intimidate lowers Snorlax's attack, so we take a bit less damage from the incoming Crunch, after which I go for a superpower to deal as much damage as possible. Snorlax switches it up and goes for Body Slam, which thankfully doesn't paralyze us before we can knock it out with a second superpower. I was really expecting Espeon to go for Psychic. I guess not. Sorry, Sharpedo, that one's my bad. Without Sharpedo to one-shot Espeon, I guess I need to send in Storm and try for damage with Surf. Espeon kind of throws by just setting up a Reflect, so I take it out with a second Surf. Now that he only has 2 Pokemon left, Red sends out Charizard. A Rain-boosted Surf definitely takes this thing out, but with a held Pasho Berry, it reduces my damage enough that it leaves Charizard in the red. Unfortunately for Trainer Red, he misses his Focus Blast and heals up with a Full Restore, but without its Pasho Berry, Charizard is easily drowned. This leaves Red with his very last Pokemon, Blastoise. Storm has been the MVP of this run, so I didn't want to make it my final sacrifice, instead sending in Kipster to fall to a couple of Hydro Pumps. You were invaluable, buddy, and we couldn't have done this without your ground typing. As my final move of the run, I send back in Shuriken and drop a Choice Specs Thunder, which both puts an end to Blastoise and an end to the run. And so I done it. I beat a Pokemon Sacred Gold Hardcore Nuzlocke, admittedly with the most powerful type to Nuzlocke with, the Water type. But hey, it was still a great time Nuzlocking one of my favorite Romhacks. I might even consider Nuzlocking this one with a much weaker type in the future. So leave me your suggestions down in the comments below, and until then...